that thumbs up if you were audible. Boss man, give me a microphone check on 1 2 1 2.
1 2 1 2 1 2.
How's
Is this
everybody
a rap
doing?
show today?
It's a rap show.
We're doing rapping?
We're doing rapping.
All right. Yeah, we're live, baby. Here we are.
How's everybody doing out there in podcast land? We're here on the YouTubes to inspire, entertain, to chat it up, to keep everybody company. Most of us, the vast majority of us, are locked the F down. And it doesn't need to be all down.
Could be locked up.
Error, changing broadcast status.
Eric, hey. Steve A, hey. What's going on, guys? Kevin Miller. Ryan, how are you? Thanks for joining us, guys.
Everybody feeling good in the comments? Everybody feeling motivated? It's Monday.
Jeff.
Or is everybody getting off to a slow start?
I'm feeling motivated. What about you?
The weather has turned. Yesterday was officially here in Austin, Texas. It announced itself summertime. It is summertime. So the cool thing about Austin, if you live here, is you get summertime like a few months earlier than everybody else. So for the next 3 months, me and you, summertime kind of guys. If you see great tans, if you see positive emotions, it's coming from the weather. But you pay for it in July or mid-June when it just becomes this whole new season called like death oven, whatever.
Summer 2.
Summer 2.
No, it's just when you get out.
Summer 2, the revenge. Then we're getting out of here.
You got to get out.
We're getting out of here.
Steve A says, already had a sale, so I'm good. Hey, can we talk about our sales today? We had some sales too.
Let's talk about positivity. Okay, so let's get started with the show. We're starting right now. As you guys know, the boss man and I used to be rappers. We were really good rappers.
Really good.
Amazing rappers. And so what we decided to do today is to demonstrate to you our freestyle skills.
Yes.
So we are going to talk about any prompt, any question, any color, any song, any car, anything that you want to hear spoken about, rapped about here today. The boss man and I are going to do that after a few brief opening topics.
We're going to freestyle. So if you have questions or comments, we're going to answer them.
Yeah.
Anything you want to know.
So the first topic of two, the second topic we're going to get to is called the build by opportunity of a generation. But first, I want to talk about this little thought experiment we cooked up back in the day called the 737 plan. Something that you can think about. It's a cocktail party game. It's this idea of, look, a lot of us run lifestyle businesses. We run businesses that we think are enjoyable, that are profitable, maybe have that emotional margin. So it's not that intense. The power of under optimization. Now, the 737 plan is sort of like, well, what if you had to buy a jet? What would you do if you really needed to crush it? And one of my ideas I always thought was, well, we would turn the tropical MBA into something that competes with universities. Like, there's all this demand for this, like a university, what is its real purpose? It's to sort of credential people to get employment that they can then reliably earn an income for the rest of their lives and retire. Well, what if the tropical MBA could give people a reliable path to making remote income for a lifetime? And I always thought, man, this is my 737 idea, but I don't want to be a teacher, all this kind of stuff. And so no 737 for me.
Well, we talked about it this weekend. It's certainly emerging as like people, this is going to happen for sure. This idea that you're going to continue to go to university, get a degree, get out, make enough money to pay back your loans. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. I actually read a post on Medium this weekend. It was somebody said, like, basically if your plan is to go back to school, to university in the fall, like, don't do it. And here's like the 5 reasons why. And they were all very salient points. Like, I was like, yeah, I can't imagine
solid arg
doing that right now. It seems ridiculous given all the opportunities. I mean, just given the fact that I haven't checked a resume for anybody we've hired in the last like 10 years for a college degree, like, don't care, man.
Yeah.
Just don't care.
And there's no solid argument for you caring at this point. And you know what the crazy thing is? One of the most surreal moments, you drive down the highway and it's like no close encounters of any kind on the side of the Austin. That's surreal. I feel like I'm in a Spielberg flick, like, oh gosh. One of the most surreal things in the world is that there's not a single white collar employee on the planet, or there's a few, but the majority of us are asking the existential question, how much do we really need these offices? Because as like TMBA folks and remote workers, our real brethren in the real world, so to speak, are white collar knowledge workers. And now they're all thinking about a life that we've been living for the past decade. And it's such a cool moment. And that same existential question is being asked by students. It's one that we've brought up countless times on this show, which is, do we really need to, like, do we need the quad and the mascot in the basketball games? It's cool, but is that promise of going and getting a big loan, being in debt, is it really going to pay in terms of a career? And maybe we could do something better. And this all leads to this idea of, we've had an all-time week, month, day at Donna My Jobs.
Before we talk about Donna My Jobs, I just want to recap your idea because I think it's important. The 737 plan. Basically, it's like, again, it's like a lot of our businesses that we run and that we think about, lifestyle is a huge component of them.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I'd love to own that business. I'd love to run that business, but like, I'm not willing to give up my lifestyle because we've talked about this before, multiple currencies. Like I enjoy travel almost as much as I enjoy money, or I enjoy this or that almost as much as I enjoy money. And so a lot of us, we don't build these businesses that could afford us a 737, not because we're necessarily not capable of it, is because you have to make so many trade-offs. You know, you watch like Steve Jobs, like biography and stuff like that, and you're like, man, that guy was a dick, right? And it's like, yeah, but he like accomplished a lot. It's like, well, he didn't hang out with his daughter ever. It's like, yeah, but he built Apple. It's like, these are the types of sacrifices that you have to make when you try and buy a 737. And your idea when you wrote that article was kind of like, basically, hey, if I had to actually make a shit ton of money, what would I do?
Yeah.
And this article that came out, I think it was this weekend or last weekend, the Andreessen Horowitz article.
Let's just pull it up on the screen here. It's time to build memes, everybody. Mark Andreessen, one of the thought leaders in Silicon Valley, wrote this kind of like inspirational piece about, hey, like we basically built, you know, apps for 10, 15 years or whatever. What if we built societies and stuff? And yeah, hell yeah, Mark, I'm into that.
It was a cool article. Definitely go and read it. But I think the call to arms, maybe even for this community too, is basically like, hey, this is the opportunity to like really build something. Like this is the time where you can dig in and go for your 737 if you want to. Do we want to?
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to bring it back to Donna My Jobs,
sure.
Which, I mean, a lot of dominoes have been falling for this brand over the past few weeks. I mean, we mentioned that Rob, one of the biggest bloggers in the world, gave us a number 3 podium ranking. Speaking of universities, which a lot of kids are now protesting their tuition, which is crazy and predictable, I think. FSU links to us this morning as a resource. This podcast, by the way, is in many school curriculums, which is we're starting to invade academia. But there is this increased interest. All these big media brands are going around and they're asking themselves, how can people work from home? And Donna My Jobs is one of the answers that's popping up. And so in terms of our revenue, in terms of the traffic, and the email subscriptions have doubled since last week, day over day. And so the reason we bring all this up is because it sort of feels like a moment. I mean, one of the TMBA listeners called me like the day after quarantine started and was like, this is the moment of a lifetime for you guys. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And I bring it up here on the live stream because we're not really sure what to do. You know, I do think that there is this opportunity to connect young, smart people with entrepreneurs, like this apprenticeship model, but there's a way to turn that into a systemic thing. Like we have like 7,000 or 8,000 resumes in our database. So these aren't just like,
I think we have more than that now, but yeah.
These aren't just like email opt-ins. These are like young people who've given us all their information. And we went to them with like a college alternative that promised like some kind of facilitation in terms of placement with remote companies. I mean, I think we could charge a lot of money for that, and there'll be a lot of interest for that, and we could put out a good product. So maybe that's one thing we could do. But, you know, because it's a marketplace, because it's a new thing, we're sort of at a loss. So I thought I'd bring that up in case any of y'all have any ideas.
And like Stephen A., we had 3 sales this morning. Woke up, and I think that's the most in one day for job listings. And then we're working on a resume review service, We haven't even published that yet, and we got another sale for that. So things are definitely heating up over at Donna My Jobs. I guess to be expected, but at the same time, like, another thing to consider with this stuff is, like, I think we started this in like late 2017. We probably didn't have the website live until 2018. So basically 2 years plus some change. It's like, yep, takes that long. Like, you just forget, Dan. You just wake up one day and you're like, oh yeah, Donna My Jobs is doing so well. It's like, dude, we've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah, we talked about it, like consistent effort mixed with a market opportunity.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought of when you mention like multiple currencies, it's one of the reasons why we do businesses like this. I had a now an infamous podcast appearance on Noah Kagan's show last year where he totally schooled me. He sat me down and said, "Yo, go out and get 10. What do you got?"
This is a shirt.
Oh yeah, no, shout out to sumo.com. Noah basically schooled me and said, like, what are you doing with Donna My Jobs? You're just like burning cash. You're such a noob, bro. Why don't you get 10 true clients and like make 10 grand next month? And I was like, I put on my TMBA ball cap and I said, I want to have a product business. That's why I want to have a platform business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have, run responsible businesses. I've saved my money and therefore I don't have to have clients. That's why I don't want clients.
Yeah.
Like, any of y'all who have clients right now, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, clients dictate what you build. They dictate how you spend your days. Sometimes they dictate what you think. And I don't want that. I'm not against that as like a rule or whatever. But like when I'm thinking about multiple currencies, Noah's right. I could go out and make 10 grand from a client tomorrow.
In our businesses, though, we are kind of against that. I mean, this is something that we decided like way back when we first started our first business because we saw it.
Yeah, we came from clients, and clients are tough.
Okay. Jeff says, so it's been about 1,000 days since you started this. A little bit less than 1,000, but it's exactly right. 1,000-day principle. 1,000-day principle essentially says that you'll replace your income within 1,000 days previously to whatever career you're in.
You know what I'm doing. I'm just tamping the brakes. Just get it on that 1,000 days exactly.
Exactly. It's like, slow this stuff down, guys. Like,
I'm calling everybody and throwing in distracting projects.
That's so true. Well, we've already got some things that people want us to discuss here.
Okay,
today,
so
Dan.
let's then drop our buy build opportunity of a generation bit until tomorrow, and just do some freestyling. How do you think about that?
The one thing I wanted to talk about was that Tainan article, because we got 2 or 3 things here, but I think people will start to trickle in a couple more questions for us.
Okay, so a hot second. Again, the theme of today's episode is that Ian and I are going to freestyle. You can put one word in, you can put a question in, a prompt, anything. We are going to freestyle your comments after we go over just one more article here. Let me pull up. There's this blog. I would call it like one of the OG bloggers is this guy named Tainan, and he writes a really cool blog called Tainan.com. And I'm like such a big fan of RSS feeds. So shout out to RSS readers. It's so old school. It's so slow. I sit and I read so many of you I read your articles and I think about them, and I don't necessarily retweet or share on Facebook or whatever, but they get in me. And Tainan is one of these bloggers. I always read his thoughts. I love that he sits down and shares with us what he's thinking. It's these sort of blogs that got us to where we are today. Like hearing from people like Rob Walling and Tainan and Seth Godin and these people, rather than reading Inc. magazine, which is what I was reading in 2004.
Yeah, at the dentist's office.
Yeah, and I didn't realize until 5 years later that I was actually reading some journalism major who's 24, their interpretation of something happened 4 years ago. So I love bloggers. In fact, we are rebooting the TMBA blog, and we're going to put up a blog post every day this week. I'm going to get on the phone with our team after this live stream to boot back up our blog, since we have so much to talk about during the lockdown. So Tainan writes this article last week called Making Purchases at Sweet Spots. And I thought, whoa, this is like such a boss man idea. I love it. Mm-hmm. And so I want to share 2 thoughts that Tainan shared in that article. So he's talking about why he's able to enjoy all these amazing things that most people think are out of reach. Like he drove a Bentley. He lived in a really cool RV. He owns a private island with some friends. He has like apartments all around the world, and he lives in a condo that cost him $50,000. Some cool stuff. And his philosophy is based on two ideas. One of the things that these purchases all have in common is that they're items that people typically finance. When people have access to financing, and by the way, this applies to college educations as well, they usually buy something that is irresponsibly expensive, like
It's
your
true.
marketing degree from North Virginia Technical College.
Actually, that sounds like a community college, and I don't know. I might advocate for that still.
Fair enough. When they don't, they often buy the cheapest thing possible because that's their only option. So this creates a middle where things are too expensive for cash buyers to afford them, but inexpensive enough that a finance buyer would just buy something more expensive. Why get a used Bentley when you can get dealer financing from Bentley or Mercedes and also a warranty? So this is a really cool point. Do you want to react to that, or do you want me to put the second point of the philosophy?
I feel like I've been living that, which is interesting. I think in the article, he bought a Bentley, and it was like a Bentley's like a high end luxury cruiser automobile. I think he bought it for like $22,000, and a lot of times these things new are 100, 200 plus. And so the idea,
no disrespect to Tainan, who's my minivan man, bro. Bentleys are pretty lame.
Bentleys
Totally
are pretty.
lame.
I would never drive a Bentley, and I would probably never drive a Maserati. Actually, a guy that we bought a car from the other day, he had two Maseratis sitting out front, and I wanted to ask him, like, hey man, like, I'm a car guy, but I just don't get these cars. Like, tell me what's going on with this thing. Anyways, I think Tainan's idea about sweet spot is true, which is basically it's not like a entrepreneur mobile, like it's not a $6,000, $4,000 car, and it's not a financed, new Porsche. It's this in between level where people would generally finance. So if you're going to finance something, you just go get the new thing. They wouldn't buy the mid level thing that you can buy with cash.
Exactly.
And I think he's right. There are a ton of deals to be had in that market segment. And I think that's true with homes. I think that's true with watches. I think that's true with boats. There's a bunch of assets that fit into that class. And a lot of times there's tons of wiggle room on them, because a lot of times in people's minds, they're like fully appreciated. Basically, like they're like, oh, I enjoyed this thing. Like maybe they paid cash, maybe they didn't, but it's paid off. They just need to get it out of here. And so there's tons of negotiation room in terms of the price that they're willing to sell it to you for. So I think there is a sweet spot there for sure. One of the things too with financing is a lot of banks, they won't finance like an older Bentley because they assume if the thing breaks down and you have to pay for it, basically you're not going to make your payments and the repair bill. So they just won't finance it. So this thing's sitting out on the market and nobody will give you a loan to buy it. So you have to buy it in cash. Well, then, who's going to buy it in cash? Only somebody that has cash. So, and there's arguably less of those people than can finance. So I think this is a good model. This is a good thing to look after. And he says the same thing about his home. He said in Las Vegas he bought a home that for whatever reason you couldn't finance it. Like maybe it was foreclosed on or something like that. So I love this idea of sweet spot buying. I feel like it's something I've been doing for a long time.
Totally. And there's one other point he brought up in there I'll just put on the table here. Another thing is that with all these purchases is that they come with a very strong preconception which clouds people's judgment. Most people do little research and feel uncomfortable going against popular opinion, so they never see what they're missing. I'd guess that 95% of people in America think of Las Vegas as a very expensive place to live that's dominated by gambling and partying. The truth is that it's a very expensive place to live, has excellent access to nature, and that most people here rarely or never go to the Strip. Now, I'll combine this with something I'll call the Rolex Rationale. And with a lot of these asset purchases that you're getting in at sweet spot, what you're trying to do is mitigate your downside. You're trying to diversify out of cash and maybe expose yourself to an upside opportunity, but you're not really counting on that. The most important thing is not feeling the downside because your cash would have just been better.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this, I love this idea of like with a personal residence, Don't buy that personal residence unless you see something special in it and that you would live in it for 5 years. Same deal with the
Yep.
Rolex. Don't buy the Rolex because you think you're guessing that everybody's going to love like X kind of Daytona in 5 years. Buy it because you want to wear it for 5 years.
Yep.
And that kind of mitigates your downside risk. And it also, it's this special moment of like, you see something maybe that other people don't see. Like, for example, right now, there's so much. If you think the stock market is insane, a lot of that insanity you're seeing by people who are emotionally committed to their markets. And you see it in cars, for example, you see it in luxury watches. There was this first wave of like, people saw the pandemic and they were like, all right, I'm going to take a little hit to get out of this inventory because I got to like pay my rent and mortgage and staff.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got people who are really committed to the market and they all think it's coming back. Like every dealer of Rolex that has like a marginal book and is sitting on 200 pieces, a couple million in inventory or whatever, they are holding. And I'll tell you what, we were talking last night, like everybody who's holding on to assets like this that are cash intensive, that they bought in high on, they got three options right now, in my view, based on what I think is going to happen to the economy. They can sell right now at a loss and take a huge shit. That's number one. That's a pretty good option right now, in my mind. Number two, you can hold on for years and years and years and weather the storm and find another way to make a living. Or number three, you can wait 3 to 12 months and totally suffer financial ruin. That is sort of my guess. When you look at, for example, I'll talk about like the Rolex GMT Master 2. I should pull up a thing, but there's one example of this watch that, to my taste, it's got like a blue part of the bezel. Mm-hmm. It's called the Batman. And everybody just, when it came out, everybody just went crazy for it. And all these flippers, these speculators and stuff, they got into the market and now they're trading this thing. And there's so many dealers that have 10 of these watches, 20 of these watches on their books, and they got in high. And now they're holding all that inventory, hoping to get through this thing and that the market comes back. Man, I would not want to find, this is like a parable for business, right? Which is like, they're emotionally invested right now because their livelihood depends on those watches being what they bought in at. Now, thinking Tainan Sweet Spot, there was an all black bezel version that was discontinued that is selling at basically a little over retail right now because it's like not hypey. But if you want a dress watch, why would you want it to be blue? It's like, for me, it's like I see all black and I'm like, that makes so much more sense. So I can live in it for 5 years. In 6 months, I'm going to have an all-time, buy-in level. And maybe someday, 15 years from now, some smart kids are going to say, why did grandpa think the blue one was cool? Anyway, that's my take on Tainan Sweet Spot and these Rolexes.
Awesome. The other thing that I think might happen with these markets is I think the small guys might get absorbed by the bigger guys. So,
sure.
If you're holding 20 Rolexes, you might just call Uncle Dan with the bigger shop and you say, "Hey man, here's the deal, dude. I haven't sold a watch in 6 months. Like I'm screwed basically. Buy my inventory."
Well, and so, the reason we're talking about Rolexes right now, because people might be like, wait a second, I thought this was the TMBA, like coconut cash, rice and fish heads, baseline, and what's going on? It's because the stock market is so ridiculous and it's so complex. I mean, cool. But looking at things like cars, Rolexes, going into the dynamite circle and asking people how their businesses are doing and stuff, this is ways we can start to grab a foothold as to like what's actually happening. Going back and seeing how assets behaved at the last downturn.
Yeah.
When you look at like IBM or the S&P 500, it's so difficult. Whereas when you look at like a specific model of car or Rolex, you can start to just develop an understanding for yourself about how the world might look and behave in the next 12 months. I'll tell you this. This sense, I'm going to, put my flag down in the sand right now. This kind of sense of optimism, I dig it. I like this idea that Silicon Valley is going to figure out a way that's better than the epidemiologists, and we're going to, have a new normal, and America is going to build fission power plants, and we're going to be back and all that. Great. I don't think that any of that's going to happen. I really think we are going to hit a crunch, and this sense of optimism is cool for the markets. It's cool for the politicians, but as an entrepreneur, I think the appropriate mindset is to look at right now as the build buy opportunity of a generation, all this optimism stuff, whatever motivates you kind of thing.
Sure.
But if you're sitting, if what you're trying to do is hope that those Rolexes are going to be the same price that they were at this height of insanity 6 months ago, I wouldn't bet on that. You know, don't bet on that color as an entrepreneur. That's my take.
I think you might be right, Dan. And I'm doing something for the first time in my life that I never thought I would do. Is I'm looking at cars from dealers, because of the same reason you're talking about with the Rolexes. It was basically like, you know, how long are these guys? Who extended these guys credit to buy all these nice cars, and how long are they going to be able to hold on to them?
Not long. I mean, the margins aren't good. It's the same deal with the stock market. A lot of these, you know, they're spending a lot of money to make a little bit of margin.
Dan, let's get to these comments
Freestyle.
and questions.
We're doing freestyle. That's what we're doing.
All right. So the first one, we're just going to go from the top of the list here. So if you start popping them in, we'll get to them at the bottom. I promise we will get to all of them. Dan, what is the status on the RV? Did I miss you closing the deal? Yeah, right. Do you think Dan would go through this show and not tell you that he closed that deal? That's the thing that he's the most excited about.
I would tell you in a heartbeat.
All right, so let me just give a quick update here, and then you can give your version of this. So basically, I think Dan has settled on a Class B, which is like the Sprinter Transit, all-in-one kind of van that you can park in a parking spot.
Bug out van.
Starting to see more of these things come up for sale. But I don't think that we're ever going to see a lot of these things for sale. Starting to see a lot of these, or a few of these things too, for like cheap with a bunch of high miles on them too. But I don't know if we're ever going to see these things go online for cheap prices. And here's the reason why, and you can weigh in for this. But basically, they didn't make a million billion of these things like the Rolexes, right? It's just like everybody that wanted an adventure van kind of bought an adventure van, and a lot of people paid cash, some people financed or whatever, but they're not things that they have to sell, or these people aren't necessarily in immediate danger of losing this asset because they live in it full time. It's their house. They don't have a mortgage payment. They were so wealthy that they could afford to buy it and keep it on the side of the shed for indefinitely. These are not things that people probably have to get out from under. So I think that's part of the reason why we're not seeing them for sale for cheap.
Yep.
What say you, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's less about market timing for me and more about lifestyle. So I'm George Washington style, dragging my feet on it because like I want more information. You know, I got a good piece of advice from a friend about this. It's like, man, I don't know how much of like this purchasing decision is really just about you like reacting to this short moment in time, as opposed to you know, thinking about whatever your new normal is going to be and stuff like that. And I don't really think that I want to live in this thing. So maybe I'll definitely be looking at vans that are more bug out style, something that like you can drive on a day-to-day basis and then also go on camping trips out of. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on the RV thing.
I think you'll buy one, man. I just think you know, when you see it, the price is right, you're gonna be like, yep,
I'm
that's
gonna
it.
There's
right now they're still hitting the market for 60 to 80 to 120,000.
No way I'm spending $60,000 on a van for fun. But Ian and I had this conversation on the patio, which is like, how do we even make these decisions? It's so weird when we all have these like emotional barriers of like what $1 means and what 10 means and what 100 means. And you know, if it's interesting just how those barriers get broken down, but I'm sure you all can relate. Like there's a resonance out there. Like I know enough about these vans that when the right one goes up, I'll know. I'll go to the bank. I'll pull the trigger.
Yep.
So that'll happen here shortly.
Mark B says, Rolex watch wrap, please. I think we kind of did that. Is there anything else you want to say about Rolexes?
And it's not just Rolexes. It's luxury watches in general. It's basically been like a really hot thing in the last 5 years. As the economy was doing really well, you really saw it in these luxury watch brands. And the vintage watch market and social media getting on board. I mean, it's another thing like van life. Like people really, the younger generation really started looking at these beautiful vintage timepieces and saying like, yeah, I want a part of that, you know? And it just kind of tracked with all the success we were seeing. It just seemed like this kind of no-brainer. Like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you buy a $25,000 Rolex? Like the Paul Newman Rolex sold for 17 mil. Like it's a bargain at 25,000 or whatever. And it's almost like the way buying condos was in California in 2006. It's like duh, you didn't buy a Rolex? Like, what were you thinking? And so it's this mix of, I always loved watches. So like, for example, one of these days I'm going to talk about my $20,000 vacation. Part of that was taking my parents shopping in Hong Kong. And one of the coolest things, if you're a watch person, is to go to Hong Kong and just watch. We shopped watches all day long, and I took them to all the cool little shops. You go up the stairs and all that, and we all bought watches that day. And so I've always been into watches. And then there was this combination of there's these really cool blogs and YouTube channels like Hodinkee, and there's all these great like authorized dealers who are like hustlers in New York that do their take on it. And it's just like a cool like business related thing because you can get inspiration from these like traders and flippers, and then bring that into what we do here, which is we build value. We're building our own watches over here ideally, but it is a cool thing, and I just love watches. And for those of you who are not familiar with the scene, I mean, Rolex dominates the luxury watch industry like nothing else, and they're kind of like cheap gold bars.
It's a store of value.
It's a store of value. It's considered a cash equivalent, and meanwhile, you get these dope luxury pieces that you get to wear. And I'll tell you this: there's an enormous part of me that thinks it is not a cool thing to like. I don't know, whatever Kim Kardashian stands for in American culture, but like to drive a cool car just so other people think you're cool or whatever. I mean, there's part of me that like looks down on that, but then there's a part of me that says, well, the incidences of people wearing expensive luxury watches to them being interesting in terms of like what they're doing from a business is pretty high, especially if they're wearing like a watch person piece. It gives you a conversation starter.
It's a signal.
I realize it's a signal, and I realize it's an expensive one and sort of a ridiculous one, but I'd be lying if it didn't start like really high level conversations in my life. Like if you're in a social setting and you spot like a vintage Submariner across the room, you walk right up to that person and you say, "That's a great watch." And I guarantee you that person will want to talk about their watch. 10 out of 10 people with a $10,000 watch want to talk about it. And then the next question is, how did you afford the $10,000 watch? And then the answer to that question, I guarantee, will be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's like what you were talking about earlier, which is basically doing it because you want to do it too. So I think that's the important part about this. Like one of the cars that gets the most attention in my life lately is my first gen RX-7. Drive it every time I drive it, somebody stops me and they go, "Oh man, that's so cool! I used to have one." Or this is a $5,000 car.
100%.
And it's a conversation starter. Now I could drive down the road in a brand new Porsche, base Carrera or whatever. Nobody would say a thing. I mean, it would almost be invisible to most people. Nobody has a connection to that car. It's brand new. It just looks like money. You know what I mean? You actually have you have a taste. You have a take on your watch.
I'll tell you what, go out, and it's not just about money. It's the same deal in the watch industry. Go out, buy a Seiko turtle and adorn it with a bracelet of some color, and everybody will know instantly that you're into watches, and you'll start the same conversations for $300.
Jeff says, please rap about how to ball hard in a 1994 Geo Metro. Asking for a friend. Oh, Jeff, I hope you have a 94 Metro.
Dude.
Metros are cool cars, actually, and there's like kind of a cult following. If you don't remember them, it's like about the size of a shoebox. It's like one of the smaller cars. I think it has a 3-cylinder motor, but it's one of these like ship boxes that's still on the road because it was built decently back in the day.
Yep.
It gets great gas mileage. I think it's like easily over 30. I endorse that car. Actually, I really do.
Hey, it's Lindy. Hey, shout out to my GMC Safari owners, my Chevy Astro owners, my Chevy S10
Those things
owners.
are all gone. Those things are all gone. I've never seen a Chevy Astro in the last 10 years.
They are around, bro. They are around.
Eric says, you passed me fast, but I'm saving gas. That's right. All right, so Mike Stankovich, next question. Any thought of competing with Upwork on short-term gig work as well as job placements? Yes. So basically, okay.
1 year ago.
Yeah, 1 year ago, we had this idea and we kind of tried to start it. So here's the bottom line with some of this stuff is we're on WordPress still. and we're thinking seriously about getting off WordPress and building a platform, maybe in Rails or something like that. But WordPress is limiting just in terms of what it can do and what our capabilities are. So I think it would be amazing if we had if we had our candidates facing, on the website, basically, so you could like browse through them. You could hire them for gigs, for long-term work, all this kind of stuff. But we're basically hampered by our technology right now. And so a lot of these features that I think would be cool to roll out are being held back by WordPress. That being said, I think WordPress is an interesting limiter, because if we did have unlimited time and resources and money, we'd probably try and go out and build a bunch of stuff. But right now, we've been focused on basically promoting the best remote jobs from around the web. And I think that that's a strategy that seems to be, I don't know, somewhat working for us. So, that being said, I think at some point we're going to have to move off WordPress. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but to answer your question specifically about gigs, yes, we've thought about it. We toyed around with it, but I don't think it's our main value proposition right now.
Yeah, totally. Right now, it seems like our main value proposition is, it's almost like remote jobs for the rest of us, because like commission-only sales jobs and tech jobs, that was remotized for cool companies, years ago. And now the question is basically, well, now every functional area of the company is remote. But I see a lot of WFH stuff. I see a lot of MLM stuff, a lot of 3-letter nasties. Where do I find cool bootstrap companies? And that's sort of our niche right now. The need, Mike, really seems to be on the candidate side. And they want to work for you, Mike. They want to figure out, and they don't want a gig. They don't want to be a freelancer. Like, they want a remote job with a cool company. And the path to get from like that desire to actually working for Mike, I think that that's where like the most value is. And because these are the same people that are spending $100,000 on a degree, and in earnest, like they're spending $100,000 for what they see as completely legitimate reasons, and maybe are, and they're willing to spend that kind of take that kind of risk to work for you and your company someday. And there is a job site. I want to say it's Flex Jobs.
Yeah.
So what they do is they basically do this for like Fortune 500 companies, where they charge their community of candidates. And so like if you're a really ambitious candidate and you can, you have some money or whatever, you can pay a lot of money to help get placed one day with a Fortune 500. I think there's some opportunity to do that with our styles of companies.
Agree. Okay, Mike Stankovich also says, also Lambo, do you really want to be that crypto Wind Moon guy? Yeah, Lambo is not a car guy's car, for sure. Lambo is some kind of signal that I run away from. Like when I see it, I just run the other way. Unless it's like a 1970s Lamborghini Miura, like when they were actually badass cars. Nobody I know that's into cars has a Lamborghini. A Ferrari, yeah, that's a race car. Jim says, I'm looking to buy a Tesla maybe in a few months when people are desperate to unload. Again, think about this idea of desperate and what that actually means. Like, time in the market is important, but think about what we talked about earlier, which is like, are people actually going to be desperate to unload their Teslas? Well, I'll tell you this. I've actually seen 2 Teslas on Craigslist, Model 3s, which is their new model, with like 5,000 miles, for like $10,000 to $12,000 off what they paid. So, and that's happened in the last like 3 weeks. So, I think these were like low 40,000s, and I like perked up because they had autopilot and everything. And I think fully loaded with like autopilot and everything, they're like 55 or even a little bit more. So I think the Model 3, you might start to see people unload because it's a new car. It's kind of like a new money car too, right? It's like, oh man, I'm gonna like get into this base Tesla. It's like you couldn't afford the $100,000 Model X,
right?
So I think I'm already seeing
it's a I got a good job car right now.
Exactly right, exactly right. So I think you'll see some of the 3s. I'm already seeing some of the 3s, for low prices. I haven't seen any X's or the sedan models yet.
One of the things I wrote to my buddy Mark B this weekend, shout out, sent him a little text. I said, it was about watches, but it could really be applied to any of these assets that are entrepreneur, mobile, or sweet spottable. It's just close the issue for 60 days. 60 days, shut the laptop, close down the Craigslist. Of course, it's fun, but if it's not fun for you, I think there's a lot of wisdom in the squeeze is going to come in a couple months. People are, I mean, holding on to optimism right now, and good on them. But in terms of timing the market, I say close the laptop for 60 days.
Jim says, favorite place to live in Asia? Same question for Europe. Same question for South, Central America, and North America.
Woo! Oh
Okay, I think that's a fun question. It definitely deserves some context too.
It depends what you're trying to do. Are you single? Are you a family? Are you building a business? Are you enjoying your wealth? One of the things I joked about Barcelona, Spain, greatest city that I've ever been to. I think like if you were in front of a Sim City gamer competition and you like put some mountains and then some beach and then like you built these apartment complexes that were like super dense. It's part of the problem with the virus in Barcelona is like it's the third most dense city in Europe. Let's have everybody live on top of 100% retail.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you walk around most cities, it's like, I'm going to Paris and I'm going to go to the Bois and I'm going to see the Eiffel Tower. You go to Barcelona and you're like, I'm just going to Barcelona. Like I'm going to see the city. It's that wonderful. But one of the jokes I had after people say, well, if it's so great, why did you move away? It's like, it's an awesome place to move when you're 55, not necessarily 35. In the 3 years that I lived in Barcelona, it didn't really contribute to my business a whole lot. And we were at a moment when we wanted to do more things. And I said, Barcelona ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a PETA to figure out how to pay these people taxes anyway. So I'm going to bounce and go places like Chiang Mai and Austin that really contribute. I mean, last night on Twitter, there's a little thread going around that says, holy F, like the mind share of entrepreneurs that's happening in Austin right now is out of control. And it's true. I'm in Austin here and I pick up value as I go along. It sticks to me. It's like, oh, I met this cool person. And whereas in Spain, everybody's trying to enjoy themselves and have a good time and go on a picnic and go on a hike and a bike ride. And it's amazing. It's so cool. But if you're trying to hustle and build a business, would I recommend moving to Barcelona? Nah, not really.
No, but it's a great lifestyle area. In Asia, yeah, let's just stick on the topic of vacation because I think that's a fun one, or lifestyle inspired. In Asia, Dan and I, we met in the Philippines in November. I was there for a wedding, and you came over from Chiang Mai, and just reminded me how much I love the Philippines for vacation. Now, of course, it has like all kinds of other great things that you can do. Like you can go to Manila or Cebu, and you can hire people, and it's a wonderful place to hire people too. But I just love it for vacation. Like everybody's friendly, everybody's having a good time, everybody's joking around. It's cheap, the beaches are beautiful, it's hard to get to, relatively speaking. We just had a great time at that resort. And my favorite part was us just on the patio every day, every night, and then going to the front desk to check out, and they're like, "Well, here's your bill, sir." And it was like $300, and there was a lot of beer and and going on there.
The bartender's like, "Hey, do you want a margarita or a beer?" And we're like, "Yes,
both." So I just forgot how much I love the Philippines as a fun place to be. Like it's just a really enjoyable place. Like it's low pressure, the food is good, the drinks are cold, the water's beautiful, good time.
Yeah, definitely, it's an adventure and a plane ticket. Whereas other places in Asia are more developed and maybe not as much adventure per minute you're there. So yes, Philippines is amazing. In terms of so that's adventure vacation. One of the types of vacations I'm thinking a lot about is golf vacations, and one location that is amazing is Malaysia. And there's a wonderful YouTube channel called Golf Sidekick. It's a young South African guy who with his sister who's based at least part of the year in Thailand, and he does these amazing Asian golf getaways. And golf in Asia is just really popping right now, and it's so KL, and next year I'm also going to be going down to Hua Hin, which is I think the top golf, maybe not the top golf destination in Thailand. You might argue Phuket, but I think in terms of like the people that are in the know, you're going to be able to get on world-class golf courses, less tourist buzz, and So those 2 locations for a golf vacation for sure. What about a vacation in the United States or North America? My vote is going to go for Montreal. I would say if you know, an outsider came here to North America and said, "Take me to your best city," I would say, "We're going to Quebec." Montreal is a wonderful mix of the best of North America. You get your free refills, but you also got some European vibe. And Canadians are just badass people. So shout out.
I think this year we're headed up to the Pacific Northwest. Hopefully, we're gonna hop in the RVs and whatever van Dan has, and we're gonna head out for a month or
That's
so.
right.
South America, never been. Straight up, never been. I have a friend, actually 2 friends that have houses in Belize. I think that's maybe the next spot for me to go because it's actually a short plane trip from here. And I've heard
Friends
some
over
decent
locations.
things.
Friends
Yep.
and scenes over locations,
100%. 100%. Okay, let's see here.
Again, we're doing freestyling here. We'll freestyle on any topic, any prompt, any comment. Are you hitting all the comments, boss?
Yeah, Alan says, got to get a tea time in Bangkok. I agree. Bangkok is a fun city too. It's just overwhelming. I've been there like 10 times. I'm like, man, I still don't get it. It's so big.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim says, you guys started a awesome product-based business years ago, different environment now. Interested in starting another one again? Why? If you were to, how would you go about that these days? Strategy.
I have a thought because
Sure.
Jim, I have to mention I have been fantasizing about starting another product business.
Really?
Yeah.
This is news to me.
Well, we talked to Alan Walton the other day on the podcast, and if you haven't listened to that live stream, that's the one to go to. At the end of the show, he advocated for a 1 SKU business. And that's how I would do it, Jim, is I would find something like Tainan said. It's like a sweet spot recognition of, years ago, I remember Ian and I, it was like 2015, we were driving down the road, or 14, and I was like, why can't anybody make water worth drinking? Everybody says hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And I'm down, but I just don't want to drink water all day. Like, make something fun to drink. And
speaking of which, this is a fun bottle.
So you decide, you make fun bottles, you make fun containers like Yeti. You put bubbles in it like LaCroix or Waterloo. You put tabs in it like Goo Nutrition. Now all of a sudden, fast forward 5 years later, and this is like an undervalued space that a lot of people saw, and a lot of people can win just by seeing one thing that it's like right in front of your eyes. It's like everybody wants to drink water. You die if you don't drink this stuff, but it's like it's just kind of is boring. How about we make this fun and healthy?
We talk about product businesses pretty often, I guess. Just like, well, it's more fantasizing though. We don't. I mean, we actually haven't put pen to paper, but one of the other ideas that we've that I think we can both get behind is non-alcoholic beer.
Non-alcoholic beer, absolutely.
It's a huge thing in Europe, and it's starting to become a thing here in the United States. The United States is so weird about stuff, though, man. It's just like there's like these non-alcoholic bars and stuff like that. Nobody wants to do that. What you want to do is you want to go to a normal bar and you want to drink non-alcoholic beer. And the other time when you want to drink non-alcoholic beer is after you get done doing sports. Like in Europe, when we're riding bikes, there is nothing better. Nothing better in my mind than slamming 2 non-alcoholic beers after you ride. You don't want to get buzzed when you're still feeling euphoric from your ride, but you do want to get that those calories and that carbonation.
And the last thing you want to drink is like more Gatorade or bullshit like that. So after we go on these rides in Spain, we pull up our bikes like onto the beach and we sit with the wind in our face, and it's just like, bring the zeros, like bring the non-alcoholics, and we just hydrate on these beers, looking at the waves and stuff. And it's a really big thing in Europe. They do this at sportives, they do it at marathons, and so again, Jim,
they even do it at the Olympics. By the way, last Olympic, I can't remember what country it was, probably Germany or something like that. They like imported a bunch of non-alcoholic beers for the athletes. I think this is going to be big stuff.
So again, back to Tainan's sweet spot. It's like it's not a guaranteed method or whatever, but you see something that is uniquely valuable to you. You see this, you have to believe in the value. If you do something that there's like already obvious money there, then you're just a trader. You're just one of these Rolex bubble flippers. And that's cool. If you're a lot of people have a trader personality. My personality is like, I'm willing to believe things, that me and Ian can make this industrial furniture better than like these Chinese factories or these local mom and pop shops. Like, we can make the designs better. I believe that. And someday everybody's going to agree with me. Someday America is going to agree that drinking non-alcoholic beer makes a ton of sense, and it's not just for alcoholics, which is cool. If you're an alcoholic, you want to drink non-alcoholic beer, whatever. But how about for responsible drivers, for people who don't want to feel buzz every night, people who are concerned about their health, people who just went for a run? Someday Americans are going to get woke to this. And that's how I would start a product business today, is I'd find one SKU, whether it's in the cycling niche or the car niche, something that we understand, and say, man, we believe this. And by the way, only 1,000 people need to believe it too for us to have a viable business. I remember Ian and I sitting down saying, we only need to sell 500 valet podiums for me and him to be free.
Yep.
Jeez, it's got to find 500 people who believe this. And that's the beauty of e-commerce, and that's the beauty of product business. Now, you could say the same of a service business and say, I only need to find 10 people. Well, that's true, but then you're listening to what those 10 people want for your time. Whereas typically, if you have 500 people, those people are going to say, hey, great non-alcoholic beer, guys, but I would spend twice as much money if you had an IPA. And that's the kind of feedback you get. And it's like, that's why I'm big into products. So yeah, I've been thinking about it.
The other thing to note about some of these ideas that we're having about product businesses or whatever businesses is that we're like deeply entrenched in the problems. So like there's only like 5% of the planet rides their bike as much as this guy does. So when he comes to me and he's like, hey, I want to build this product for a bike, I'm like, all right, pretty sure you have a beat on that, And the same thing with the valet industry when we started. I worked in it and we were manufacturing, and Dan was like, all right, yeah, pretty sure you might know what you're talking about here. So when we see an idea or a product that's worth improving, I think it's worth asking yourself, like, how much experience, knowledge, expertise do I actually have there? Like, am I in the 5% of the no?
I'll say this, know where you're at on the one hand, but on the other hand, give yourself credit too. Be a little impressed with yourself, Jim. Like, don't overestimate just because this product comes in a shiny package and it has a brand on it and everybody seems to buy it, doesn't mean that the people who developed that product have thought about it for the last 5 years or even give a shit about it. And it doesn't mean that you can't step in as someone who might be in the 10% and work your way up to a 5%er or a 1%er and eventually make that your trade for the next 5 years. We didn't have, nobody has any right to be doing what they're doing. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the point.
You ask forgiveness, not permission.
There you go.
Kevin Marshall. Oh, thanks, guys, for popping in these questions.
Hey, Kev.
Less fun, but similar question. If tensions between large dominant powers were to erupt in the next 10 to 20 years, example, U.S., China, Russia, which countries would be on your top 3 lists to weather it? Well, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily my area of expertise, but China seems well equipped. The United States seems well equipped, and I don't really know past there who's going to be the most equipped to weather those types of problems. I think it's the United States has a lot of resources. We were talking about this the other day. It's like I have a hard time thinking of a country in terms of real estate that has better real estate than the United States.
We actually played this game. So you pull out a globe or a map up on your computer screen, and you just do like basketball pick 'em, like pick your team. Which countries have the best real estate, And yeah, America's at the top of that list. So regardless of the ridiculous financial institutions in our country, that's an asset, but a tough question. I don't feel qualified there for sure.
Jeff says you guys should swing by Wyoming on your trip. Yes, we definitely will. Somebody says this is getting back to the idea of the development over at Donna My Jobs. Is Joomla better? I don't know. Joomla's PHP or something like that. I don't know. We're not developers.
Joomla would be better. I mean, the problem is that the moment you introduce a platform like that, you also increase your maintenance costs, and you make that something that you do. And so that was a big consideration to us. For example, like the reason I moved to the Philippines was that you and I decided that we needed to be based on Drupal. And now all of a sudden I'm moving to the Philippines because something I'm doing is managing Drupal. I mean, we could have taken phone orders and chunk the credit card and not made cart suggestions and stuff like that. And so I think there is an enormous value to constraints, like you said, Ian. We tend, especially in information and technology spaces, we tend to completely underestimate the costs of feature requests.
Yeah.
And there's something, that's one of the things I love, back to Jim's question about being in the product business, which is you have to be very deliberate about your space, your physical atoms, and the costs. It's a very real thing.
100%. You make a feature change, like that feature change takes 9 months.
Yeah.
You like send the update to your factory, and like they do a test for you. They send you over a prototype. You send it back. You say, okay, put it into production. That's 3 months later. And then by the time it gets to the United States, it's another month or whatever. It's literally 9 months. So you have to be extremely deliberate about your feature.
Yeah.
It's a good way actually to approach feature requests.
Feature creep, I think, is the official entrepreneurial term for what we're talking about here.
Ben says, Ian, can you touch a little bit more on how you view and have used holding large amounts of personal cash other than personal margin of safety, since you don't participate in the stock market? Well, sure. Okay. So when I talk about holding cash, I talk about holding cash for opportunities. And I think I'm probably a better entrepreneur than I am an investor. And I think that maybe that'll be developed over time as I have more to invest, hopefully. But, I think the market is just a place to keep your money, and it could go up and it could go down. The reason I don't participate in it is because I don't have control in it, because I don't have intimate knowledge about how it works. I think there's a lot of people, day traders and whatnot, that actually know how the market works and can short it and make money. That's not me. That's not my skill set. That isn't what I've been developing. That's not what I'm interested in. So although I have cash on hand, it's for opportunities that I understand, like cars that come for sale that I believe are a good value, like property that comes for sale. I don't know a ton about property, but I'm learning, and I'm learning that I picked a good place where my house is, because all these breweries and whatnot are going up. And when I say picked a good place, I mean a place that's growing, that's expanding, that has that's money is coming in here, that I understand that type of money. Like I understand that type of person that's coming in here. So I feel like maybe I can participate in that. And I bought a piece of property down the street from my house a couple months ago. So there's in cash. So there's a bunch of cash sitting over on that property right now. So I'm interested in hoarding cash, so to speak, so I can wait for these opportunities to pounce. And it's not necessarily even about market timing. We're talking about these Rolexes hitting the market and things like that. I think that's an interesting time to try and buy low. Some people say you make your money on the buy, but I'm not that good at this yet. And so I think I'm just, what I think I've done my whole career, my whole life, is left the door open in some way. Like I just want to leave options open, and I don't want to give my money to somebody that I don't trust or that I don't understand. And if I take a hit in terms of inflation, that's something that I'm willing to weather, because I personally feel more comfortable with that. Dan, I'm sure you have thoughts about this too.
Well, I'll just leave it at this. I mean, Nat Eliason was on the pod a couple of weeks ago, and we opened the pod with that conversation. He says, if you're basically an entrepreneur, can you not figure out a way to double your money in 10 years? Aren't you a more reliable vehicle for this stuff than the stock market? And it's tough, because being that reliable vehicle requires you to venture into uncertainty and take risks. And it's so much easier to pop on over to Mr. Money Mustache's blog and see the up and to the right thing and say, I don't have to take on any of that uncertainty. I'm just going to put all this money into the stock market and it'll double it for me. And I'm in the former camp. I'll just say, I'm going to take it as my work every day, that I'm going to proceed for many, many months and years and not know what to buy. And then all of a sudden it's going to present itself right in front of me. And that's how it works. And I think that that's difficult, because things like the stock market, you can open up a Scottrade account and you can buy right now, and you can invest and you can do it. Whereas sitting on cash is like just sitting on cash,
It's pretty boring.
Sitting on cash. And then all of a sudden it's like somebody's going to need it.
Yeah. And you're going to see an opportunity.
Exactly. It doesn't matter whether it's up or down. Ian bought this property at the very top, and I personally did not shed a single bead of sweat on your behalf, because you're going to be just fine, because it wasn't about timing the market. It was someone needed that cash, and it was in the sweet spot, like Tainan said. I mean, it was a weird property and stuff, and man, you saw the value in it and the title opportunity, and we can get more into why that was a good deal. But my point is that, like, it didn't happen until it happened. You couldn't just Scott trade it. And that's the reality. I mean, I guess speaking as the old guys in the room, when we bought out our first partner, for example, it wasn't like a thing until it was a thing, until it was upon us and you just saw it. And that's what entrepreneurship is about like distributing your opportunity scope. And then when you see it, you go. And that's how that 10 years is going to look. And you are going to double your money if you're good at this stuff. And you might even triple or quadruple it, and maybe more. And that's the promise, rather than risking the whole boat for what are retail returns.
Two more things on this point, and then we'll get to the next one, which is here's how one of the stories behind this property is. I check Redfin and Realtor.com at least once, if not twice a day, for the past 4 years in like certain areas that I'm interested in. So, you know, I have like 2 realtors that like send me properties. I almost always see them before their automated MLS whatever sends me the property. Yeah. So I've already seen it, and that was the case with this property. We went into I locked the product up within 3 days of it being on the market. I sent in 2 offers, and I might have been even bidding with myself. I haven't figured that out yet, but I mean, it's like the way that we run our businesses. Like, you have to I believe you have to put yourself in control here. You can't outsource this to some realtor or something like that. Like, I'm the hound dog. I'm on this internet every single day.
All right. It reminds me of, like, you want to be that 5%er. You have to find a way to be on the inside in terms of the information. It does take time. So you got to love it. You got to love whatever that information is.
Yeah.
But I'll give a tip off. On Friday, we're going to do top entrepreneurial movies. So if you want to go watch one ahead of time, Rounders, an all-time great movie. Matt Damon with just a jaw-dropping performance. I love that movie. I hope Rounders 2 comes out here pretty soon. There's a famous line. There's many famous lines. One is, you know, if you don't know who the sucker at the table is, it's you.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right. And final point I want to make about this this property is, you know, Dana and I, when you look at your cash in your personal bank accounts, that's like post-tax and all this stuff. Dana and I spend a ton of cash that could be in our personal bank accounts that goes right back into the business. Like, in that we try and like build features and products and develop these new companies and things like that. So, you know, our bank accounts would be much bigger if we weren't investing in our companies. We are investing way more in these companies than we are in building our stock cash piles.
That's actually a great point. Over the year, I'm obviously like discussing and observing other people who have business models like ours or in similar industries and stuff. And consistently, we are always at a very high percentile of reinvestment relative to our marketplaces. We just always, since day one, I mean, the very first, like, one of the biggest decisions I ever personally made was deferring my personal salary. Our first draw was your salary, and then the second draw came along, and we were like, no, we're going to hire with Dan's salary, and Dan's going to keep moonlighting for another company.
I had to make payments on my 1998 Mustang GT.
Right.
You respected that. You're like, all right, man, keep making that payment.
and that legacy or history has always been part of the way we do business. And that rationale of like, yeah, that is the best investment we can make. And it cashes out not only in asset value over time, hopefully, but also in this multiple currencies thing, which is like, we've always had a much more robust team than people with similar size businesses. I mean, we've got an amazing team that we work with. Most podcasters you see on live streams, right, like this, like, they're editing their own stuff. And meanwhile, I'm on a phone call afterwards with like bright minds and people who are thinking about the sorts of topics we're talking about and products. And so I think that's a really good point, is we're always been big on the reinvestment.
Eric says, I could see Ian and Dan making non-alcoholic beer in Austin for sure. Yeah, we're starting to get the beards for it. Jim says, as partners, how do you guys handle the division of labor for your projects? Also, do you guys do a formal annual reviews or check-ins with each other to make sure things are going well? I'll start, and then Dan, you can weigh in. Very informally. I think one of the things that Dan and I have traditionally done is we've kind of worked on different projects, like different aspects of the business. Like Dan goes off and does this, Ian goes off and does this, and then we use each other basically as sounding boards and as advice boards, and we come together and we strategize on how each other can achieve the things that we're trying to achieve in the business. So I think traditionally speaking, we've each kind of had our individual roles. This year's a little bit different, actually. We've been working on the same project, which is number one, this live stream, and then some of these other things like Donna My Jobs. But I think that's been part of our success, honestly, is that we work on different projects and then we come together and then we say like, hey, how can we both grow this together? What say you, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, well, traditionally it was Ian did the product stuff, I did the publishing stuff, and then we would be each other's mastermind. And once we sold the product business, basically there's just been a lot of overlap. Like we just work together. I mean, kind of like it's not as formal. I think the cool thing about having a partner is that you have someone who is tasked with telling you the truth, and that's the thing that people really underestimate when they say like, "Oh, I can't work with anybody" or something like that. It's like, yeah, but like then you're going to be all alone, and like, there's not a lot of people in life that are incentivized with telling you the truth like a partner.
Yeah.
And I think that when there's this, way back in the day, Mixergy interview, it talked about going to war with somebody, and like, it's tough to go to war with mercenaries, right? It's a lot easier to go to war with people who just absolutely have the same going concern as you. And so Ian's really incentivized to tell me something that other people wouldn't. And it's also, I know where his interests are. So when he's saying something, I'm not like having to do the question of like, I've often done where, for example, I've paid business coaches a lot of money. And unfortunately, I found myself in the position where I've had to ask myself like what their motivations were for what they were telling me. And in the case of Ian, I don't have to ask that question in the same way. So there's a lot of benefit to having a partner.
I love you, man.
Love you. Love you, bro.
There's something very also like I'd say like unproductive about our relationship too, in terms of just like the inefficient. There's something very inefficient about our relationship too, which I think that you'll find with like most of your like partners, like your wife or your husband or something like that, or your kid too, which is like we don't demand this type of efficiency from each other. And honestly, I think we could make more money if we were more efficient in our transactions, in the way that we talk to each other and the way that we work on projects and whatnot. But it probably wouldn't be as fun.
Yeah.
And so
fun is sustainable.
I think fun is very sustainable. It's one of the things that we're focused on. I think that at times like we've argued about like, should we make more money or,
make more blogs
or things like this. But in the end, it's like there's something very inefficient about what we're doing. And I think you have to be okay with that if you've been in a relationship like we have for basically over 10 years now.
But sometimes being inefficient is badass. I'll give you an example. One time, I think like it's really good advice. Smart entrepreneurs will sit me down at like DCBKK, which is so much fun. And they'll say, hey, like, what if you had like a camera crew here and you did this and you diced up the videos? And I'm just kind of thinking to myself, well, that wouldn't be fun. Like part of what we're doing here is we're creating a fun event. And I don't know, like you can like live your life being like just the most efficient, like let's just remodel everything we left. And like, let's bring back the TPS reports and let's bring back like the getting the most out of everything all the time. Or let's do something badass. Sometimes like the most badass things and the things that are the most fun worth doing, they're not just like totally optimized to the hilt all the time. Sometimes they have that margin where it is cool. And I think that that's why DCBKK is an event. Man, how many events have we seen come and go in the last 10 years? And I mean, DCBKK is, if I'm being honest, probably will go this year. We'll probably have to postpone it, although we're dragging our feet on that decision. We'll see.
We'll see about that. Actually, we just emailed them today. I think we're gonna continue to drag our feet on that.
Yeah, and we'll probably try to brainstorm like alternatives, or we'll see. But let's just assume we're in a non-virus situation right now. Like part of the reason we're able to have such a sustainable event is that there was something badass about it, like that we had our eye on. And I'm mentioning that because as an entrepreneur, that's sort of your job, is like, not everything is going to come out in the spreadsheet. Like spreadsheets are abstractions of reality. And your job as an entrepreneur is to care about something realer than realer than that. And yeah.
Alan says, Alan Walton, best pre-entrepreneur movie. I agree with you. That's a good one. It might end up on the list on Friday. Tune in for that. I think we got one or two more questions here, Dan, then we're going to wrap this up. We're going long today, but I really had a lot of fun. Thanks, guys, for chiming in. How do you think about starting a family as an entrepreneur who likes to move freely across the world? Sounds like Ian has a kid. Dan, not yet. Curious about if you're comfortable sharing. Yeah, sure. Okay, so where do I start?
Wait, can you reiterate the question?
Sure. So the idea is basically, how do you think about having a family if you want one and you're an entrepreneur?
Okay.
Who moves freely across the world. So I think the travel is important there.
Okay.
I'll just say this. I think that I'm fortunate because of a couple things. One is that it happened later in life for me, and I actually thought it would happen later in life, but it just happens that I met somebody that was ready to have kids sooner than I was. And basically, I in my mind, I had this idea like, oh, this is the amount of dollars that I need to have in my bank account before I have a kid. It was just something that I felt, it's just like, man, I want to feel solid,
Yeah.
But that when the day came and it was time to have a kid, that number wasn't where it needed to be in my mind. And so I was kind of freaking out, I didn't feel like I had all my stuff together. But in the end,
Is that why your son doesn't have a bike right now?
Oh, let's talk. It's because of Craigslist, man. Hey, he's got a Strider, and I'm very happy with that. So if you guys don't know, Strider is a little bike that you push around. It's like, it retails for like $150, $20. And it's pink. It's pink. He loves pink. I didn't feel like I had that number, and so I was like, oh man, like, I want to have a child, but I don't feel like I'm ready for that. But talking to other people, it's like nobody was ever ready. Nobody ever sat down like as a family, like, yep, we're ready. Let's go do this. It's just like you never have all your ducks in a row like that. So for me, it's been great because of my partner. I would say that she does a lot of the heavy lifting, the majority of the heavy lifting, and it still allows Dan and I to run around and build these businesses. And I think that that's great for me. So I think a couple things. One is you got to find a partner that is going to allow you to do whatever your thing is. And if your thing is like, I don't want to get off this entrepreneur train, I don't want to get off this traveling train, I don't want to get off this car racing train, whatever it is, find somebody that agrees with you. And I luckily found that person that agrees with me.
I can translate that into single guy speak.
Sure.
Which is, I'm not going to mystify kids or whatever. I would just say, like, be real about it. Like, don't be feature creep with your software startup, which is, this stuff takes a lot of time, and so does entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So you have to really decide how much rubber you're going to be able to get to the road. And if you introduce complexities like child rearing and a incomplete contract with your partner about how much of your time will be spent doing that, and then an incomplete contract with the reality of being a digital nomad or being location independent and what kind of complexities that's going to introduce, you may end up as a founder who puts very little resource into the thing that might matter a great deal, which is how you make income. So
the other thing related to partnerships that's worth noting is, like, Dan picked up the slack big time when I had a kid for probably the first year, because I was just kind of out to lunch on a lot of these things. And that's one of the huge benefits of having a partner, is that things like this happen. You heaven forbid somebody gets sick or you have a kid or something like that. That's one of the major benefits of having a partnership.
Well, I think having a partnership in a business, we have like a few episodes about like the different models. We have like a marriage model partnership, which, back to the original question about partnership, the charter isn't amount of work performed. And if you do have a business partnership like that, they can be really, really challenging to sustain, because it's essentially like a facsimile for a salary. You're like basically cheaping out. If what you want is a partnership to replace a salary, basically, you might end up paying for that in the long run, because now all of a sudden you're constantly figuring out how much work everybody's doing. So that's why, like, when you say what is a division of labor, it's like the actual answer to that question happens at a different level, which is like the chartering idea of the partnership. And then, yeah, it's less interesting to say, well, Ian's in charge of all the administrative functions. He does all the wires. He deals with all our accountants and everything. Okay, that's interesting, but like I could do that stuff too. It's, you know what I mean? Like if you were like, dude, I'm really bored with the administrative stuff.
Oh, I'm bored and I got to do it today. And it sucks.
Yeah,
but
and
that's
it does
just part
suck.
of it's just part of the, Dan's the one that, does a lot of the technical things on the podcast outside of the scope of the team. And like, that's stuff that I'm not interested in doing. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Cool. Final thought on the travel thing. This is probably just a unique thing to you individually as a couple, and lucky that my partner likes to travel. My son's been on, I don't know, he was on like 10 airplanes the first year, and now that's obviously slowed down. He has a passport, it's got a bunch of stamps in it. Traveling with a kid is way easier than I thought it would be. In terms of like travel stress, I'm the one that's stressed out. He's not stressed out. Like we had a 56-hour itinerary back from the Philippines because there was a typhoon and we're like laid over in Chicago and all this stuff. He had a blast. He had an absolute blast, And I have friends that have kids and their kids are 2 years old, haven't been on a plane yet. They got like travel anxiety. Like what's going to happen? Well, if you got anxiety, then it's going to translate to your kid, and then your kid's going to have a miserable time. We don't have travel anxiety because we do it a lot and our kid does it, and it's just like normal. It's just like normal, and I think a lot of families are like that out there too. So
there's all these,
I wouldn't
like,
be scared.
It's like I love this idea of like questioning all this supposed tos. Like, if it's good enough for you, it might be good enough for your family. And so if you love to get on that plane and love to have these adventures, one of the things, this was obvious to me even before I called this shot. Having your kid along makes these trips more fun. Because, it's like
It is.
all of a sudden, it's like it increases the experience to have the whole family in tow. So it's not a single person's game by any means. It's just don't let the media, man, tell you that.
Thanks, Jim, for the question. Eric chimes in, who has a son. He says, rate the first 2 to 3 years off. I think he's right about that. Like you're absolutely rammed these first couple of years trying to figure out what's going on, what's the new normal, man. This kid can't do anything for himself. Kevin Marshall chimes in too, who also has kids, and he says, truly wise advice, guys, on what to think about when starting a family. Thank you, Kevin. Coming from a wise guy that has a family too.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, I think that pretty much wraps up our questions.
Thanks,
guys. This was a lot of fun.
Joining us on this freestyle.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do it every Monday. We're going to be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's noon New York City time. And on Friday, we'll have Jeff on to do those movies, top 10 entrepreneurial movies. So if you want us to take a look at one of your favorite entrepreneurial movies, give us the hookup. We'll do 5 of these this week again. So join us tomorrow. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day. Productive, healthy, happy. And that's it. See you tomorrow.